What is up, YouTube? Hey, it's Cameron with Motion Science. It's great to be here today. It's Tuesday, January 11th. Happy to be here from sunny Florida. How's everyone doing today? Let me know who's here today, where you're watching from, where you're listening in from. Today we're talking about how I created the Motion Science logo animation. I get asked a lot, all the time, through emails, through social media comments, how did I make the Motion Science logo animation? So I figured, why not show you my project files, break it down for you today, and show you how I did it. Spoiler alert, it's pretty easy. But before I get into that, I want to hear from you. I want to know who's here today and where you're listening in from. So let me know who's here today. We've got, let's see, we've got all your crazy YouTube names. He 60. All right, got it. Al, what's up, Al? Good to see you here. Paul Rosenberg. Good afternoon, Paul. We got Amber here. Hi, Amber. What's going on? Paul's calling in from New York. Jacob from Slovakia. Amazing. Amber's from Wichita, Kansas. Amazing. Shout out to Kansas. We've got Jake here from Wichita as well. Amazing. Let's see here. We've got Gangadia. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Gangadia. I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. You're from Milan. Amazing. Had a lot of Italian people here, which is great. Zach from Newfoundland, Canada. What's up, Zach? Paul is almost done with Academy Volume, what is it, 1? Paul? Remind me. Shivam? Hi, Shivam. Andrew Brightwell. What's going on, Andrew? From Maryland. I think that's what MD means, right? Sahej from India. Al's from Bangladesh. Naoki from Thailand. Awesome. And Paul is in volume 1. Amazing. Great to have everyone here today. So if anybody is new here today, for those of you who don't know who I am, my name's Cameron. I've been a motion designer for over 20 years, working in After Effecks and Cinema 4D. I taught myself motion design and animation. Started with animation, then moved into design. I built reels out of spec work that I created for myself. These were personal pieces I wanted to create a reel that landed me my very first motion design job. I was a remote freelancer for 13 years before remote freelancing was even a thing. I've owned and operated 2 small boutique post houses, and I've had the opportunity to build projects for studios like Prologue Films, Digital Kitchen, and agencies like Publicis and Ogilvy and Mather. And I've had clients like 343 Industries, Amazon, American Express, Disney, Microsoft, MTV, RCA Records, Sony, and so many more. The list goes on and on. I've been very fortunate to have a very lucrative and successful motion design career. Who else? We've got Ricky here from Brazil. Amazing. Thank you, Ricky. Appreciate that. And Raghanath. Hi, Raghanath. One more thing before I show you guys how I made the Motion Science logo animation. I want to let you know that I have a free workshop over at motionscience.tv/workshop. And let me actually get rid of that. Oh, I actually deleted that on accident. Well, you're not going to see it now because I just screwed that up. It's motionscience.tv/workshop, where I show you 7 secrets to cinematic motion design. These are 7 tips, tricks, and concepts behind pro-level motion design work. Plus, I give you access to a very special offer at the end that you're not going to find anywhere else. So please check it out if you haven't already done so. I can't stress this enough. I know I'm always promoting this workshop, but it is awesome. I know a lot of you have taken the workshop and have taken advantage of the offer at the end, so I appreciate you. If you have not, you are missing out by not checking out this workshop. So plus you get some emails with some other teaching content that I don't show anywhere else. So hey Laurent, Good Times HD, what's up? Good to have you here, Laurent. All is good here. Laurent says the workshop's great. Confirm, amazing. So let me switch over here to my screen. A couple windows here that we don't want to show. And move these out of the way. Okay. So we should be able to see my screen. Yep, I can see it there. Perfect. So the Motion Science logo is actually should have had this kind of set up ahead of time. I'm going to turn off the audio here. But this is a half resolution and it's playing back here. And this is at the end of most of the videos I put out there on social media channels. If you take any of the courses, you're going to see this at the end of almost every video. There's a long version and a short version. And this is it. Very basic, but a lot of people ask, you know, how did I do this? And I don't know if I have the audio turned on here. Let's actually turn that on. Yeah, and unfortunately, it's not going to play through this. You probably couldn't hear that, but there's some really simple audio there with some piano hits that happen, and the piano hits as they happen that's when we see like the text come up here. And I probably should have set this up ahead of time, but these piano hits hit, and this text kind of comes on to those piano hits, and they kind of slow down, and that's how the words are revealed. So let me show you how I did this. It's actually pretty simple. Okay, so we're gonna back it up here, and here's my audio layer. Go ahead and lock that. So what I started off with here is I had my audio layer here, and I had just a very simple dark red solid background. And a lot of times I will use a plain, just straight up black solid. But sometimes when I actually remember, just to be honest, like I don't remember to do this. So when I remember to do this, I like to make my solids not 100% black, which is 000 on the hex code down here. I like to give them a little bit of color, right? Just a little bit goes a long way. So sometimes I'll literally go up in this area here, which is just a little bit of gray, a little bit of brightness in there. Sometimes I'll move it kind of over here in the red area. Sometimes I like to kind of play around with the blues. You know, just like it's so subtle, but it can go a long ways in design, right? So that's the first thing is I just have a dark red solid here. And actually all this is just a background. And this is just from years and years of working in After Effects. I tend to always just have a background layer. Sometimes if you don't have a background layer, it can screw up effects when you're adding effects over the top of things like adjustment layers. And it can just kind of change the look of things. So a habit I'm in is I always add a background layer. So that's what that is. And then right below that, like I said, is the audio. And if I hit LL on my keyboard, you're going to see it shows me the waveform. And in the waveform, every time we see a peak here, like here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 peaks. And each time we see a peak, by listening to the audio, that's a piano here, a piano hit. And what I'm doing is I'm going to actually animate to that sound, and I'll show you that here in a little bit. But that's all you're seeing here. It's just it's a nice like string quartet that kind of builds, you know, just has a nice, like, if you think of an orchestra, it's building up, and then there's a piano hit, a bing, 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 bing. Okay, so that's what the audio waveform is. So the next thing we're going to do is we need to bring in the 3D shape. And that's what I have all the way up here at layer 6 is this 3D shape we see here. And this is just from my logo design. This is actually how it ends when I have just a still image of my logo. That's what we see is this mark here. And maybe I'll zoom in here a little bit and we'll try and go full res here. So that's what it looks like. So all I did to build this is a pre-comp, okay? And if you go into the pre-comp here, you're gonna see that if I turn on the alpha channel, which is by clicking this button here, this is a simple box animation with an alpha channel. So we have the layer at the bottom here. If I solo this and I turn off Luma Matte, you're gonna see that this is just the render. And then I also rendered a alpha matte, a Luma Matte, sorry, which is this. It's just a white and black render, right? So white represents transparency. So anything that's white is going to show through this, and anything that's black on this layer is going to be invisible. So by turning this track matte to Luma Matte, that's what it does. So the white is what we're seeing through here, and we're seeing the actual render from Cinema 4D, and the black is what's transparent, okay? And I'll show you why I did this, why I chose this approach versus just a render with an alpha channel here in a minute. So how did I build this really simple object? I mean, like I said, it's very simple. So here in Cinema 4D, it doesn't matter what version of Cinema 4D you're in, all I did was I took a tube, okay? And if I kind of go here, if I took a tube object, and I'm not going to jump into too much about how to use Cinema 4D. You should check out Cinema 4D Quick Start if you've never used Cinema 4D. But under Create Primitive, I have a, what is this, a tube right here. So I clicked on Tube. And if you do this by default, you're going to see here that a tube is just exactly what it sounds like. It's just a round tube. But if I go down into the parameters here, I can actually change the rotation segments from 16 to 4. And that creates basically the shape of my logo, right? It's like kind of the mark. So that's all I did, right? Made it 4 sides, which is what we see here. And then I also took down the height to make it very thin, right? So I think if I change, obviously the height is the depth of it. So that's that. How did I do? Oh, the inner and outer radius. So you can make it thicker like this or make it thinner. So I just made it very, very thin. And I have very simple rotation keyframes on this. So all this is doing is it's rotating from 0 to 150 right here. This is the value. So if I go back to the beginning, we're at 90 degrees, which is, if you look here at the camera is looking through the shape here. And I'll actually, let me show you a different perspective here. If I change this and I kind of move out of the camera, you can see that the camera is looking through it, right? Just like this. And if what the actual move is the camera moving back, pulling back from the shape, and the shape is just rotating. So you can see the camera's pulling back and the shape is just rotating and coming into a resting position. That's all it's doing. It's very simple. The camera pulls back, the shape rotates, and boom, there is our animation. That, when you render it out, looks like this, right? This is what we're looking through the camera. Boom, there is our very simple animation. So that's how we started it, okay? The next thing we did is I wanted to create the, like what we see inside of this, which is what I call it atmosphere. And so I'll solo that, and that's these clouds inside of here, okay? Now, the clouds are in there, and if we play it back, I'll probably have to go to half res to be able to play this back again. Turn off the audio, because I can hear the audio, but you can't. So we'll stop about there. And so you can see there's the clouds in there, and then they're gone, right? So the clouds are gone at this point. You don't see them inside there. So how did I do that? Well, remember back here in my 3D pre-comp when I had this top layer, which is the white and black values. White is what we can see. Black is what's transparent, right? Now, if you don't understand Luma and alpha mattes, you can probably find some stuff on YouTube if you Google it. I'm also going to recommend After Effects Academy. I think I can't remember if it's volume 1 or volume 2. Someone asked me this the other day and I forgot to look it up. I think it's volume 2 where we talk more about this kind of stuff in detail. But I have this alpha render. So if I go back into my main render here, I have my atmosphere and I have it doing the same thing. It's doing a luma matte of that render above it, which you can see here. Here it is again, right? So if I turn off the 3D logo. Oh, and I should back up a second here. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. I also did a second pass, okay, where I created another object buffer, and that's this plane I have here. If you watch right here, I have a plane that's parented to my tube. So if I turn that plane on, all it is a flat plane, right? There's no depth to it, it's just flat, and it's sitting inside of this mark. So when the mark turns, the plane is turning as well, right? And you can see it inside there. That is creating a second luma matte, which is what we see here, just this flat plane like this that's moving back in space, right? And that's saying where it's white, we're going to see through it. Where it's black, we're not going to see through it. Which is when I bring my atmosphere in here and I don't have a luma matte, there's my atmosphere. But when I turn on the luma matte for this atmosphere, it's the same thing. Like it's kind of like it's creating a window for us to see into, right? Which is inside of this 3D object here, right? Now there's a little bit of a movement here to the clouds. See how they're kind of pushing back as well. So the mark is pushing back and the clouds are pushing back. So how did I do that? I have a pre-comp here. Super simple. It's just a JPEG image that I scaled down. I started at 100% scale and I went back to 75% scale here. So if I play it back, this is all it is. It's just pulling back, scaling back. Very simple. And where I ended this animation was right here at frame 2 seconds and 18 frames. Okay, so frame 68. If I go back to my main render and I'm at 218, you can see here is where we no longer, right there, that's where we no longer see the clouds again. So that's why I ended my animation right there, because there's no reason to animate beyond this point because the clouds are gone at this point. So very simple. And then on top of this, I did a curves plugin, which I ended up not using. I made it black and white. So if I turn that off, you can see, you should be able to see, there we go. That's back to like the blue clouds, but I wanted to make it black and white. And at the end, I'll show you how I color graded this. And I also used optics compensation, which all this does is, if I back out a little bit here, optics compensation, if you use if you reverse it, which we see up here, it defaults to a non-reverse, but you're going to see how it kind of just kind of creates this curve, and it's a real subtle effect. And by just applying just a little bit of a curve towards the camera, it just gives it a little bit more visual interest when we're looking at this. So it's not something you have to do. It's just something I chose to do, something I chose to add to it, just to give it a little bit of visual interest there at the very beginning. Very, very subtle, a little bit of optics compensation. Okay, so we've got our atmosphere there. We've got, which is basically our clouds. So if I actually should probably call this clouds to make it a little bit more easy to understand. And object buffers there. It's all good. So next, what did I do? So next I had these two Illustrator layers here, and I left them in here to show you. But this is just Motion Science. When we created the when I created the Motion Science logo, I made it in Illustrator. So it's an Illustrator file, which we see here. Now what you can do is you can actually take that Illustrator file and you can go to Layer, Create, and you can create shapes from vector layers, which is what I did. I did this to the Motion Science layer and the Science layer. And by doing that, it turns off these layers. I'll go ahead and lock them again. And it creates these new shape layers, which are, one is motion and one is science. Okay, so what did I do? I applied some effects here that I end up not using, which are, you can see here, these are sapphire effects that I thought maybe I'd use them, I end up not, so I turn them off. And what I did here is, I'll bring up the timeline, is I used transparency and masks to bring these on. So if I go back and let's just solo motion by itself, okay? And if I start my preview right here, and I end my preview here, so we're focused only on this area here, so I hit B and N to do that. What I've got is each of these letters is just fading on. It's very, very simple. I also have some masks here, and I don't remember actually why I used the masks. Because I think these were all, they're all individual layers. So you can see when you create the shape layers here, M-O-T-I-O-N. Each of these is its own shape layer. So I'd have to dive in and look back of why I created a mask, because I honestly don't know why I needed a mask there. Maybe it has to do, I don't know why it does. If I deleted these masks, actually let me do that. Yeah, see, that did throw it off. What each of these masks is doing is, if you look here, each one of them is on a letter. So again, I'd have to dive back in. I can't remember. I had to separate. So I'm separating each of the letters so they, come on at random times. So that's what we see here. And then we also see a little bit of flicker here. Okay. If you look really closely, you're going to see that there's just a little bit of flicker in these letters. This is something I like to do a lot with my animations. It doesn't have to just be type. It can be anything. But what I did is I applied, so we've got these transparency values, right? So like the first letter that comes on here is M. So there's just a very simple fade from 0 transparency. So it's over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Over 7 frames, that M is fading in, like we see there. After it fades in, though, I've got a very simple wiggle expression here. And if you follow any of my other courses or other videos, wiggle is my most favorite expression. It's the expression I use for everything. Not everything, but a lot. And there's a lot you can do with it. So I use a very simple wiggle expression, and I said 30 times a second, I want you to vary your opacity by a percentage of 20. So if you think of opacity, opacity goes from 0 to 100. 0, you can't see it. 100 is completely, you can see everything, right? So I'm varying it from, because our opacity went up to 100, I'm saying that the opacity can drop all the way down to 80% or back up to 100. A variable of 20. So it could be 80, it could be 85, it could be 86, it could be 92, whatever. It's going to change that number 30 times per second, which creates this really fast but very subtle flicker like we see in these letters here, okay? So I did that with each of the letters, and then I also timed each of these letters so that to these piano hits, which I wish you could hear, every time we would hear, or I'm sorry, every time we would hear a piano hit, like we see, let me zoom in just a little bit here. It's like we see one hit here, 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 right? If I go to motion and science and I hit U, you're going to see that every time these moments happen, that's when like different letters are coming on. So like one just popped on here, go to here, one popped on right here. So these are hold keyframes. So again, I can see here on up here, these masks are dropping down to reveal the letters. I should have looked into the mask more before I did this, but I timed out each of the letters to the piano hits. Okay, that's the ultimate idea here. So we've got that going on. So let's turn on the layers that we're using. So we've talked about the background, the clouds. We've talked about the letters, the 3D. We got all this happening now. Next thing I wanted to do was I wanted to emphasize the letters even more, right? So what did I do? I created actually, we'll come back to this, okay? We'll come back to this. I'll explain what this is doing in just a second. We'll come back after we color grade this. What else do we have? So now we started adding effects to this, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to add a glint. And let's see if we can see that glint. It's a little challenging to see. So we'll go ahead and leave that on. here's rays. This is one that's easier to see. This is a very simple effect that comes with After Effects called CC light rays. And all this is doing is, you can see where it starts here. And let's go back to half res. See that light ray effect happening there? That's all it's doing, right? So I've got it I've got the center point here with a keyframe, and I'm just kind of manually tracking what's happening with my mark here. So I've got the center point keyframed here, which we see here, right there. And then it goes all the way to the end here, and it kind of just slides down that mark. So you can see it's just starting up there and it's kind of sliding down. I've also got the intensity keyframed here. So it's 0 here, and it bumps up all the way to what, 98.6. But again, I've got a wiggle expression happening here. 10 times a second, the amount of light rays is going to vary by a value of 10. Okay. So that's what's going on there. And then the intensity is staying about the same. We're still at 97.5. And then we're going to drop that intensity back down to a value of 21. So the intensity, it doesn't go away on the light rays. It kind of stays up there. Sometimes we'll animate light rays in and then out, and then they'll be gone. But I thought it's kind of interesting just to keep this up the whole time. It just kind of adds a little bit of interest. And you can see that wiggle happening right there. Again, there's like a flicker happening with that light ray. So I like that. That's looking cool. Like I said, we also have a glint effect happening. This is a sapphire effect. It's very, very subtle. It's just adding some extra light to what we see here. Next, I added some noise. Okay, and at half res, this noise looks way more intense than it actually is. This is one of those effects that, you know, ultimately when you're working with effects and you're starting to kind of polish your piece at the end, my belief is you want to go full res whenever you can, because some effects will look different at half res versus full res. So here's half res, and let's go up to full res, and you can see how much more subtle the noise is. Now, there is a lot of noise in this, and I wanted it to be a very noisy piece. You know, sometimes 15% noise is quite a bit. A lot of times maybe I'll use 5 to 7%, but for this one, I wanted it to be very noisy. So that's what we're seeing here. So there's full res and there's half res. You can see the difference there. Next, I've got, let's go ahead and actually flip this. Well, we'll keep it there. I added, we'll skip this one. We'll go to looks, right? And this is kind of where the color came in at. I went to my trusty plugin I love, which is Magic Bullet Looks. This is a third-party effect. You have to pay extra for through Red Giant. But I pulled a preset I really liked, which I think is here under Indie, is where I got it from. I don't remember the actual one I used. That's one bad thing about Looks. Not that it's a bad plugin. I love this plugin, but it doesn't pull up the name of what you started with, which is kind of annoying. So it's hard to go back and be like, oh yeah, I used this to do it. But you can see here, just by hovering over these different looks, you know, how cool it can basically look. There's all different types. There's grunge and, you know, blockbuster and analog. This is just a plugin that if I need something quick, I will use this plugin to kind of get a quick look out of it. Again, working with my own personal stuff, a lot of times I get lazy and I just want to knock it out as quick as possible. So that's why I went with this plugin. So we're going to go ahead and cancel out of this so I don't lose my look, but that's all it is. It's just a look applied over the top. And then we've got a fade, which is right here. This fade is just going to fade out the piece here at the end. Now, what's different about this is I'm not using, and sometimes what I'll do is I'll just have a black layer, and that's all this is, a black solid. And I'll go from an opacity of 0% here, so we don't see it here, and then by the end, it's 100% opacity, and it basically is just a black layer over everything, and it just makes it look like it's fading out. Well, what I did differently on this one is I actually used a mask, right? So I have a rectangular mask here, and I keyframed the mask. So it starts here, And then what it does is the mask gets smaller and smaller, and it just makes, I should probably turn it on so we can see it. It makes it look, everything is just kind of fading out. But there's also a nice feather here, a 300 pixel feather. So very feathered edge and a keyframe that is easing in here. So it's not like it's going from a really big square to like this, a large rectangle to a flat, rectangle. It starts fast and then it starts slowing down. It's kind of more cinematic to do that. And if I show you the curve here, it's, basic ease in. I think it's probably the default ease in. That's all we needed to create this. So if I preview this from here, and I'm probably gonna have to go, unless I want to wait here. Wait it out. I'm also going to show you what it looks like when you don't feather this. It looks terrible if you don't feather it. The feathering is key here. Let's actually go half res. Hopefully you guys can't hear these guys blowing the grass out here. I know I say this every couple weeks. These guys are here. Super loud for me, but hopefully you guys can't hear it. So there we go. And you can see it just creates this really just nice fade out versus just putting black over the top and turning up the transparency of the black solid layer. Now, if I turn off this feather, so if I take it from 300 down to 0, you're going to see this doesn't look good. And here we go. Any day now. See, it looks terrible, right? I mean, now maybe if you're doing some type of sci-fi show and you need like these windows to kind of close in on it, that might look okay. But the key here is that we're using feather to do this. And it's also helping that I have an ease in keyframe. It just kind of slows everything down at the end and just kind of makes it more cinematic in that effect. Okay. Now these guys are right outside my window with a big blower. Last layer I want to show you here is this layer that we skipped earlier. And this is a medium gray Scion solid. So I'm going to solo this layer so you can see this. And what I did was I took the overall look that we applied to the piece was a very, green, kind of crunchy green color. So what I did was I kind of sampled those colors and I just created a new solid. If I go to layer solid settings, in this range here, right? It's just a solid. And again, I created a mask. I just drew this mask with my pen tool, took my pen tool and just started, drawing something like this. But what I was doing, let me undo that, is I was looking at the 3D shape and the text, right? So I have my solid, and again, feathering is key here. Okay, so I just took my pen tool and just drew around this in a very rough way. And then what I did was I turned up my feathering, which if we do this, you can start to see, kind of gives it like this glow look, but I wanted it to be very, very subtle. So I brought it all the way up to 267 and I took the transparency of it down to 85 versus 100. Now, when the layer starts, which is right here, it's at 0% because I don't want you to see it yet. But as the type is coming on, that's when I want you to see it. So here it's starting to see, you can kind of see it here. Let me go to full res again. And you can kind of see it coming. I don't know how much of this you can see, but it's here. It's starting to come through and it's coming through. And there it is. It's sitting up there. And it just kind of helps to separate that text from the background. So if I turn off these solo layers and bring it back up, you can see with that look applied, it just helps to kind of bring a little bit more visual interest to this. So this is with the layer and this is, this is without. So look at that. Look how boring that is, right? When it resolves versus having this layer in there. That's a solid layer. It's all it is. And then glint, again, I think, this piece could probably actually do without the glint layer. I don't really see it happening much or changing much in the overall look. Maybe when we're in this area here, I think we're probably seeing it. No, we're still not. So, I could turn that layer off and call it a day. So that, my friends, is how I built this crazy, very simple logo animation that people really seem to like a lot. Now, with anything, you could always take it to the next level. Maybe these edges, looking back at this, these edges could probably be softened up a bit. And here, like when I look at this hard edge here and here, I probably should have applied a little bit of edge blur to this, which if I go in, blur and sharpen, probably like I don't know, fast box blur. And let me get rid of these effects I'm not even using. Maybe something really subtle. Yeah, like see, I don't know if you saw that, but if you look at this edge here, that's actually too much, maybe 1.5. So if you look at this without and with, right, it just blends it a little bit more. Maybe it's just a 1. And I'm going to repeat edge pixels for the edges over here, but really subtle. And that might still be too much. Maybe it's a 0.7. That's just one of those things that as you become pro, you start focusing on those. And like I said, I kind of rushed through this thing when I built it. Again, look at this edge up in here. So that's with and that's without. And then I did something with the levels here, which I'm not really seeing much of. I think it's actually just I took the grayscale values up just a hair. So I brightened it up just a bit. So that's with levels. Oh, I darkened it just a bit. So with levels and without, very subtle effect again, just kind of fine tuning things and getting them closer to what I think looks legit. And it's going to take forever to render this, but let me know, guys, do you have any questions about this? I mean, it should be pretty straightforward. Sometimes it can, when I talked about the masking of the letters, I probably should have had that. Shame on me. But the masking, just like I said earlier, has to do with showing the letters. And I don't remember why I did that. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions. I'll be happy to answer them about this logo animation. And then we're going to wrap this one up as soon as this finishes rendering. Almost there. I mean, you guys saw this at the beginning. Just wish I could have got that audio going. Paul said, working news, the main use for After Effects would be motion graphics. Would love a tutorial on how to make documents look good. Flying in and out, highlighting phrases, etc. Also quotes and social media pullouts. Yep, that's cool. At some point in Stylecraft, I'm going to add some broadcast graphics to that. It's going to be included with that. So that's something to be aware of, Paul. You do learn a lot of things that would relate to what you're asking for in Stylecraft. So I would invite you to check out Stylecraft. I mean, like that's where I teach you more about the design side and making things look really, really good. In After Effects, I'm teaching you how to use After Effects as a tool, and I do focus a little bit, on the design side in the projects that we work on. Stylecraft really goes into that stuff. So there you go. There is the logo animation without the music. But it looks pretty good. I probably spent, I don't remember now because I did this a couple years ago. 2019 actually. So almost 3 years ago. But Sachi, I saw that you said, where did you get inspiration from? I think it was from Lionsgate, from what I remember. Lionsgate has this kind of cloud image we see. It's very similar to the beginning of this. And then they have these like 3D letters that kind of fly out. And I didn't want to do that. But I was like, oh, this would be kind of cool. I mean, I literally made this logo in a couple days. just spent a few hours on it. And I was like, you know what? Because this is the third logo for Motion Science, and wasn't happy with the first two, and wanted to change it up. So I made the logo in a couple days, and then made this in like a day or two. And I think it's because I saw that Lionsgate intro, and was inspired by that. But great question, Sachi. Zach said, in Stylecraft, do you go in depth about aspects of graphic design for motion? I have been freelancing for a while and feel like I would like to design more rather than work from clients' supplied boards. Yeah, I mean, that's what Stylecraft is all about. It's all about design. We do a little bit of animation, but it's like, you know, I call it cinematic motion because it's pretty basic, like push in, push out, side to side. I mean, we do some lessons on animation. I shouldn't say that we don't, because there are some that go kind of deeper into it, but the majority of Stylecraft is about design, how to create beautiful compositions that then you want to animate. So, and we just changed some of the wording on the website to kind of focus more on that, because that's a question I was getting quite a bit. So yeah, definitely design heavy. Zach says another question, and Paul, that's awesome. Get through After Effects Academy first. You're on the right path. From Zach, when you were creating spec work for your own reel, how did you brainstorm ideas, fill out placeholder content? Thank you so much. Great question, Zach. You know, it's basically how I create any kind of spec work, because I still create spec work today. I created a spec piece last week. It's anything that I am called to, that I want to design to get that creative thing out. So a lot of times I'll see pieces, right, and be like, that's really cool. I want to do my interpretation of what that might be. And what happens is like the piece I did last week, I saw a piece on Instagram and I was like, that's really cool, like I always say. And I'm gonna so that was actually 2 weeks ago, and I was like, next week, which is last week, I'm gonna build something inspired by that. And what I find is I pulled it back up right before I started designing the night before, and I looked at it, okay, put it away. And then the next day I go in and design, and I create something that has nothing. If you were to see the two pieces, you'd be like, how was this, right? But it's just being inspired and wanting to create something that inspires you. So when I was first starting out, a lot of logo animations were very inspiring to me. There wasn't all the web content like we have today, because this is back in 98, 99. So I'd see a lot of stuff on TV and be like, that's, that was pretty cool. Like how it maybe like spun around and moved and did this. So then I'd go and I'd find a logo for some brand that didn't exist or was very small, or I'd just create a very simple logo. I'm talking simple, like type. And then I would animate it, because for me, logo animation was something I saw all the time. I feel like it kind of really exploded back then. That was the new thing. Like, hey, let's take our logo and animate it. So that's, just for me, it's all about just keeping all these different inspiration references and then pulling from those. And I talk a lot about that in a lot of my videos, is just having mood boards to pull inspiration from. And you can pull inspiration from type, from texture, from architecture, from magazines, from other motion design pieces, from graphic design. It doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter if you're pulling all these different pieces of inspiration from different sources. It's just all about being inspired and wanting to create work that you want more of, right? Which is something else I talk a lot about. There's this cycle that happens. So if you are inspired by title design, which is something that was very inspirational to me, I would create individual title shots, title scenes. I wouldn't create an entire sequence, no, because that's too overwhelming, right? So I would be inspired to design something with a piece of type and some type of background imagery, and then animate it in a very simple way. Because creating that type of work, putting that work on my reel, and then putting that reel out to the world for a potential client to see and then hire me to do that type of work, it's a cycle, right? So I create a spec piece of a title design. A client hires me because they saw that and they love it and they want to do something themselves. They pay me to do that. I create another piece that then goes on my reel again, and it's just this endless cycle. So, yeah. All right, my peeps. Jake says very cool. Rachid. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Thank you so much. You're very welcome. As always, I enjoy being with you guys here today. It's really fun to show you my logo animation. Hopefully you got some good tips and tricks out of it. There were some good pro tips in there for you. I'll be back. I plan to be back next week to talk more about something else. I don't know what it is. I've got it written down somewhere, but I don't remember what it is. But it'll be fun and exciting, and I know you'll love it. So thanks for being here, guys, today, and I'll talk to you guys all very, very soon. See ya.